Whereas we might set up our fork in a similar way, irrespective of the frame, the same cannot be said about our rear shock. Today I'm going to share our guide on how to quickly and effectively set up your rear suspension, be it coil or air. Today we're making this video with the support of Öhlins. So we're going to use their products, but these processes will work regardless of the brand. Before we start the process, I want you to unwind all of the external adjustments to the full open position, including any pedal assist levers that you've got. Now, a simple way to think of these adjustments are like taps. Fully counterclockwise is like a tap being full open. Full clockwise is the most closed position. We set up our bike from fully open, but we count clicks from fully closed for more consistency. First off, knowing what stroke length you've got is vital before we can approach setup or sag. Now, it might be labeled on the shock you've got, but if not, we can easily work it out. To do so, let all the air out or remove the coil and bottom it out. This will leave the O-ring at max travel. Use a shock pump to re-inflate it back to full extension and cycle the shock several times to balance the chambers, and then measure between the edge of the seal and the edge of the O-ring. A few millimeters is important. So please use the inside edges. This will give us our stroke length, which may or may not be the full length of the shock shaft. Now, how much rear sag a frame is optimized around varies from bike to bike, but a good rule of thumb is about 25% for cross-country bikes, 30% for trail and enduro bikes, and maybe even 33 to 35% for big downhill bikes. It's worth experimenting though and finding out what works best for you and the trails that you ride. When setting up our shock, even though we've got just one valve here, we want to pressurize two chambers, the positive chamber and the negative chamber. On this shock, simply pressurize the positive chamber and then cycle through the shock to equalize the two. Now, to set sag on an air shock, we want to start in our riding kit. We're then going to get onto the bike in our riding position and gently push that O-ring back down to the seal. Now, make sure not to use the brakes or bounce around too much here. Gently dismount the bike. And then remember, consistency is key. Doing this procedure on flat ground in the same riding position will yield the best results. Now, with a shock pump, reduce or increase the pressure in the system until the desired sag is achieved, making sure to cycle the shock as you make changes so that the chambers are equalized. For a coil shock, it's a little more complicated. There are two main ways you can do it. If you have somebody to help you, you can measure the distance between the two collars on the spring. Firstly, when the bike is unweighted, and then get your friend to measure again when you're on it. Subtracting the compressed length from the uncompressed length will tell you how much sag you're using in terms of length. You can then use the stroke length from earlier to work this out as a percentage. The second way is going to be easier if you're doing it alone or you're like Henry Quinney and you've got no friends. We're going to use this bottom out bumper here as our travel indicator. You can then measure this to see how far along it is on the shaft and then work out your sag. It's worth repeating to make sure your measurements are consistent. Leaving our compression fully open for now, let's move on to rebound. The amount of rebound damping we have is relative to our spring. The higher the spring rate, the more rebound damping will be needed to ensure a controlled return stroke. Not enough rebound damping and we can feel like we're going to get bucked forward. Too much and the bike will struggle to track through holes. An easy way to get a good base setting for our rebound is to lower our saddle into our descending position and then bounce on the bike. We tune the rebound off of the second bounce. So we compress the shock, it will extend, compress again, and then we want that second bounce to be the final one and quite muted. If it's bouncing several times, it's likely too fast. If it never achieves a second extension, it's likely too slow. And then we're gonna measure our clicks from fully closed. Once you're finished, count how many there are as you turn the adjust clockwise, and then make a note. Next, we're gonna dial in the compression setting. Now, while it's true that we might wanna kill any bobbing or movement in the shock for efficiency, It's worth remembering these are mountain bikes and should be set up to ride well in the mountains. A firmer shock or more compression damping can track poorer and grip less than a shock with slightly less compression damping. I would suggest setting your low speed compression setting to give a consistent platform while descending, and then using the high speed adjustment or pedal platform to make quick adjustments on the fly. When descending, more of our weight typically goes through our feet than our hands, and it's really important to get the low speed compression setting right. If the shock doesn't have enough damping, it can feel like your body weight is in free fall on impacts. Similarly, you might also feel like you use too much of the stroke and you don't have enough support when throwing your body weight into jumps or rough terrain. Here we want consistency and control. On the other end of the spectrum, we don't want too much low speed damping and the shock to feel stiff or harsh as it struggles to use its travel. Low speed compression adjustments are an effective way to fine-tune the relationship between our body weight and the chassis stability. Begin by counting the clicks. Start with it in the middle and then go and experiment. Riding is vital in setting up your shock, and a base setting is just that, a base to build upon. Some shocks will also have a high-speed compression adjustment. While this is particularly useful on big hits that use a lot of travel really quickly, it'll also often change the level of damping and support overall, which can help with pedal bob. A good way to think about this is the harder you're riding in loose terms, the more damping you want. If you're riding slow, flat tech, the forces going through the shock are going to be very different from flat out chunder. Again, set it in the middle and go for a ride. And also, if you do have it as an external adjustment, don't be afraid to mix it up a bit and fine tune it for your terrain and what you like to ride. So that's rear shock setup in a nutshell. Hopefully this video gives you the ammo you need to mess around a little bit and find the settings that work best for you.